Unless you've been living under a rock, you might have noticed that cars have become outrageously expensive. I mean, over $90,000 for a Toyota? Are you kidding me? The monthly payment on that probably looks like a mortgage payment. Believe it or not, cars used to be kind of affordable, and this was pretty neat because the car is the only reliable mode of transportation in most of the country. But it's gotten so out of hand that the average full coverage insurance payment is over $200, thanks in part to higher car prices, so this is actually kind of a serious problem. Now, normally the driving price of anything in economics is supply and demand. The lower the supply or the higher the demand, the higher the cost. And you know what? The same thing still applies here. With a growing population and a record number of drivers on the road, the demand for cars has increased in recent years, but what about when it comes to supply? We're actually selling a lot less cars today than we used to be selling. Last year, we sold 1.4 million cars less than we did in 2018 when car sales peaked. But here's the crazy part. That's just when it comes to volume. When you look at the amount of car for sale in terms of weight, well, the amount of car being sold is down less than 2%. So technically, we're still buying a heck of a lot of car. The cars have just gotten bigger and heavier and a lot more expensive. New cars have actually gotten so expensive that people have been forced into holding on to their cars for longer, with the average vehicle age now at a record high. And this hurts the supply of used cars, and well, those are now more expensive too. A 2018 Honda Civic with 50,000 miles on it has only lost about 10% of its value from when it was sold brand new. We're talking about a Civic here, not a Tacoma. And we're also talking about a drop in value from MSRP. And let's be real, nobody was paying MSRP back in 2018 because it was all about sales volume. And trust me, I would know because I was selling cars back then. Man, am I getting old. I sound like that grandpa saying they used to be able to buy soda for a nickel back in the day. Anyways, now that we've addressed the insanity of car prices, let's talk about the why. And before the keyboard warriors start screaming in the comments, corporate greed, no, it's not. It's simply a supply problem. But what's causing this lack of supply? And the answer is overregulation. The car market is so overregulated that we have laws that are now doing the complete opposite of what was intended. Take 2010 for example. The EPA wanted to reduce fuel economy targets for cars to reduce emissions, which is actually a great idea, but instead of setting clear blanket standards for all cars, they decided to get creative. And really creative. They built these complex formulas to calculate unique fuel economy standards for every single car on the road, and the logic was about as sound as boarding a plane from the front to the back. Their revolutionary idea was to base the fuel economy regulation on the size of the vehicle, meaning the bigger the car, the more gas it was allowed to burn, and you're not going to believe what car manufacturers decided to do next. They would make bigger cars. This very rule is the reason why every car, sedan, SUV, and truck has gotten so big over the years. It's why great tiny cars like the Honda Fit don't exist anymore. It's why you can't get a cheap pickup truck anymore either. And it's also why companies like Ford and GM have just stopped building cars and sedans in general. Regulators made fuel economy standards for small, affordable cars and trucks so strict that the easiest way for these car companies to keep up with these strict rules was to simply get rid of these small, fuel-sipping vehicles. And you know what? Manufacturers loved this law. It took some of the power from the consumer and gave it to the car companies. Remember earlier how I said car sales were down in terms of unit, but in terms of weight, car sales haven't really dropped all that much? In most cases, a car's price is tied to its weight. Heavier cars require more materials and energy to produce, making them more expensive. And now, with no small affordable cars for consumers to fall back on and resistance to more expensive vehicles, the consumer has less choices to choose from, and the manufacturer gets fatter profit margins as a result. So they might be selling less cars today than they were in 2018, but they're making a heck of a lot more money doing so. Bigger cars also creates another problem, which is safety. Pedestrian deaths have skyrocketed in the US, and while distracted driving plays probably one of the biggest roles, you are much more likely to die when you are hit by a large SUV versus a compact car. And then there's driver safety, because nobody wants to be stuck driving a tiny little car when SUVs and trucks these days are the size of old school buses. It just makes everyone feel a little unsafe. So this kind of creates an artificial demand for bigger vehicles as people want to feel safer driving their cars. And since cars cars are so big and heavy these days, we've seen crash safety standards evolve in response. In 2020, the IIHS in its side impact test used a 3,300-pound barrier traveling at 31 miles an hour. Today, it uses a 4,200-pound barrier traveling at a quicker 37 miles an hour, which is a huge jump in force, and in order to score well with these tests, manufacturers have responded with strategies like reinforcing the doors with ultra-high strength steel bars, which, as you can imagine, makes cars more expensive. And on top of that, we have all kinds of other mandated safety features like reverse cameras, lane departure warning systems, front collision warning systems, and even a reminder telling you not to forget your kids in the back seats when you turn off your car. This is all good stuff and all, but as you can imagine, it makes cars more expensive. Now let's circle back to fuel economy and emissions. While bigger vehicles made it easier for manufacturers to be more compliant, these targets are still incredibly tough for them to meet. Honestly, despite getting rid of all these small cars, you'd think that the average fuel economy of vehicles would actually go down, but surprisingly, it stayed level even when you exclude electric vehicles. This is of course thanks to powertrain advancements, which, you guessed it, adds to the cost of a vehicle through a variety of complex strategies. Most new vehicles that remain powered exclusively by the internal combustion engine have transitioned to kind of more complicated powertrains like smaller displacement turbocharged engines, or they'll engage in frowned upon strategies like cylinder deactivation and probably your favorite one, start-stop technology. And then you got things like hybrids. Cars like the Camry and the newly announced RAV4, which was last year's most popular car in America, have moved exclusively to hybrid powertrains. Hybrids actually come with a lot of benefits and they drive a lot nicer, but as you can imagine, they are more expensive vehicles. You also have all different kinds of hybrid options available. You've got mild hybrids like those found in the CX-90, or performance-oriented hybrids like those found in the Ford F-150 hybrid, and even plug-in hybrids, which has kind of been the go-to solution for high-performance luxury vehicles like the new M5, for example, where they figured out that they could keep the gas-guzzling V8 engine in it as long as they were fitting it with a big enough battery that allowed the car to be powered exclusively on electric power for a short period of time. The downside though is that these things are a lot heavier, they're less fun to drive, and of course they are more expensive. So far we've only talked about extra costs that you can actually see, but there's actually a lot going on that you don't see. No matter how hard these manufacturers try, most of them are still failing to meet the fuel economy standards that these regulators have set. These standards are very strict because they were designed with EV adoption happening at a much quicker pace than it currently is, which is why the targets in recent years have risen extremely fast. As a result of these rapidly rising targets, many car manufacturers have been on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars worth in just CAFE fines. There's one catch though, which is that these fines can be offset with ZEV zero emissions credits, which are earned by building electric vehicles or acquiring them from automakers who have an excess amount of credits. Tesla is a major seller of ZEV credits, selling billions of dollars worth of them every year, selling nearly $3 billion of them just in the last 12 months. That's some serious cash that costs them nothing, and it's basically pure profit that's handed to them from the competition. Now, no legacy automaker wants to hand their competitor like Tesla some free money, but at the right price, if it saves them from paying these more expensive government fines, it could actually be worth it. So depending on the legacy brand that you're shopping for, the manufacturer could be passing hundreds of dollars or maybe even over $1,000 per car on average in added cost to kind of offset the purchase of those regulatory credits or whatever fines that they've been stuck paying. That is until now. The new big beautiful bill that will probably be signed into law by the time this video goes up completely abolishes not only the EV tax credit starting September 30th, but effective immediately, all fines for not meeting CAFE targets goes to zero. So does this mean that car prices are going to drop immediately as a result of this bill? Probably not. Not only do big changes to car production take years to become reality, meaning it would likely take years to reverse some of the decisions they made to reduce fuel economy standards like making unnecessarily large vehicles, we still have tariffs to deal with. Car companies have been paying huge sums of tariffs over the past few months, not only on the cost of importing cars, but also the parts that are used in domestically produced vehicles, so any savings from CAFE eliminations are probably going to be offset by higher tariffs. But the biggest question, at least to me, is will Honda bring back the Honda Fit to the US market? And also, will car companies in general start producing small, affordable vehicles again, like small sedans and small hatchbacks, and especially things like compact pickup trucks, so people don't have to resort to importing 25-year-old K trucks? That to me is probably one of the more exciting parts of this change, but only time will tell. But maybe there is actually hope for future car prices. With that being said, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.